Don't forget, you can reach the latest episode of Potomac Watch anytime. Just ask your smart speaker, play the Opinion Potomac Watch podcast.
From the opinion pages of the Wall Street Journal, this is Potomac Watch.
Welcome back. Let's go back to Washington, D.C. and check in on the greatest show on earth. No, it isn't the circus. It is a place with even more impressive acrobatics and high-wire acts. It is the U.S. House of Representatives. And to catch people up, remember what happened yesterday. Jim Jordan was the latest candidate for Republican Speaker of the House. He fell short by 20 votes on Tuesday. Ultimately, there was not a second vote that was held that day. The decision was to adjourn until 11 today on Wednesday morning. And the results of that first vote today are now in. There were 2 Republicans who voted against Jordan yesterday who decided to switch their votes, and they backed him today. But at the same time, he lost 4 Republicans who supported him yesterday and did not this morning. And so, Bill, it seems to me that we are no clearer after 2 weeks of paralysis in the House to getting an answer to who might be able to unite this fractious caucus and get the House of Representatives moving again.
Yeah, I don't think there is anyone, or at least no one whose name comes to mind. They're talking about Congressman McHenry as giving him more powers as Speaker pro tempore, and that would be better than having no one. But it would also symbolize Republican dysfunction. Remember, Republicans came to Congress planning to normalize it. That is, would pass appropriations bills on time, go through regular order and process. And now it looks like we're going to have some Rube Goldberg set up there. Frankly, I don't know if you were Republican, you would want that job. It comes with too many vulnerabilities. You're vulnerable to a minority of Republicans willing to side with the majority of Democrats to create chaos in the Republican Party. So, I mean, I've said I think it's like signing up to be the 5th wife of Henry VIII. Precedents are not good, and I see no sign they're coming to their senses. At this point, really, almost anyone would be better than continuing this chaos much longer.
Jordan, as of now, seems like he is not ready to throw in the towel. However, one of his spokesmen is telling the press that we're going to keep going. And Kate, part of what seems to have happened here is that last week there were 55 Republicans saying they wouldn't vote for Jordan on the floor. Yesterday, that had fallen to 20. And so he had clearly made an effort to mend fences and provide suggestions and promises about how he would lead that brought along more than half of his detractors. But it seems to have caused others to dig in. It seems there were suggestions that people who decided they were going to block Jordan might find themselves keelhauled on cable TV shows or talk radio shows. And also notable is that there are 18 Republicans in districts won by President Biden in 2020. And 6 of those yesterday did not vote for Jim Jordan. It seems to me that they're worried that the direction that Jim Jordan would lead the House would make it more difficult for them to keep their jobs and to keep the majority, keep the Republican majority in 2024. Kate, there is this suggestion now floating around that acting Speaker Patrick McHenry, he might be the guy who could fill the breach, and maybe he doesn't want the job. It's hard to think who would want the job, but maybe he could be convinced to do it for the good of the country. And the House could pass some sort of measure that gives him power to bring a limited legislative agenda to the floor. But the questions there are twofold, I think. One is, will Republicans be able to do that on their own? Will they be able to muster a majority to do that if Jim Jordan is still trying to run his whip count and his supporters are still trying to get him over the line? And the other scenario is, would Democrats come along? Could you see a bipartisan push to allow Patrick McHenry to get some government funding bills going, since we have this deadline for a government shutdown now looming in the middle of November? I guess my answer to that is, I don't see what incentive they have. Either Hakeem Jeffries and the Democrats would want some sort of concession in order to do that, which I don't think any Republican wants to grant, or else I think the Democrats are just happy to watch the Republicans stew in their own dysfunction for another 2 or 3 weeks, because that is part of their argument in these swing districts come 2024, that you can't leave these guys in charge. These guys can't get their act together to even pick their own speaker.
Sure. I mean, the Democrats would certainly extract a very high price for their compliance, which would expose the futility of removing Speaker Kevin McCarthy because he supposedly, didn't fight hard enough for conservative priorities. But here's one person I've been watching, Kyle, to your point about the districts that Biden carried in 2020. I've been watching Jen Kiggans, who voted for McCarthy in the second vote. She represents a district in Southern Virginia, and she was one of the few Republican flips in the midterms from the Democrats. And she has been saying that she won't vote for Jordan because she thinks he might cut the defense budget, which to her is no longer tenable given the world environment. She has a point there. And also because it makes perhaps a government shutdown more likely. We're getting towards 30 days on that clock. And remember, the Republicans were making a big deal about returning to regular order. And now we're cruising towards a government shutdown with, I think, only one appropriations bill passed. But I've been watching Kiggans because as a marker of some of these Biden districts, there was some speculation that some members like her would vote no as a protest on the first ballot with Jordan and then decide to go with Jordan after registering their complaints about, this minority of the conference hijacking the place. But it hasn't been how it's panned out yet. And in fact, Jordan lost more votes on the second ballot than the first and has dipped below, I believe, what thresholds McCarthy was ever at. So it's hard to see a real path for him now. But I think, to your point, the vulnerable Republicans certainly see that the politics of dysfunction are not helpful to them, not helpful to expanding their majority in 2024. And so I think a McHenry option at this point does look attractive if it would allow them to do some of the most basic functions of government while they try to sort out a more tenable solution, provided they can.
On the point about this being more than the faction that deposed Kevin McCarthy, that is exactly right. 22 votes for someone other than Jim Jordan on this second ballot. And remember, there were only 8 votes that deposed Speaker Kevin McCarthy 2 weeks ago. And so, Bill, that's another possible scenario, is throw McCarthy's hat back in there in the ring and see if people have decided to give him a second try. Or I suppose Republicans could go to somebody else, somebody whose name is not known to the public, maybe somebody who has been there a long time and is respected across the factions. Maybe somebody who is in line to leave the House or retire, and so could be a placeholder candidate for this very narrow Republican majority that we have right now. Bill, we'll give you the last word. I suppose we'll be covering it all the way, but hard to see from just the vantage of this afternoon how Republicans get their way out of this mess.
Yes, I think while the whole country is taking the lesson that this operation to decapitate Speaker McCarthy was counterproductive and suicidal for the Republicans, clearly the fraction within the Republicans is taking the opposite lesson and say, this is now the time to indulge myself because my vote will count more than it usually does, and keep the party in limbo, keep business from getting done. I think, some of them are in safe seats, so they can take these votes, but it's really a bad sign, the incoherence of the party and the incoherence of the original plan to take down McCarthy without having anybody that they propose in his place or a plan to determine someone is just crazy. And you compare this too with Nancy Pelosi. Look, I was in the Bush White House for the Pelosi years. She was very powerful, even though at times she had a very slight majority. Remember, she got through Obamacare, and I think the last big thing she got through was the infrastructure bill for Biden, and she only had a 3-seat majority. But Democrats somehow understand that whatever their individual desires, they need to hang together or they'll hang separately. And she was able to get a lot of things done. And Republicans have not learned that lesson.
Thank you, Bill. Thank you, Kate. Thank you all for listening. You can email us at pwpodcast@wsj.com. If you like this show, please hit that subscribe button. And we'll be back tomorrow with another edition of Potomac Watch.